another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GrokTALK.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GrokTALK.com.
GrokTALK.
All right, welcome back. I'm Steve McDonald here with Skip Rogers, Mike Murphy. You like that? Skip Murphy, Mike Rogers. Max Abramson stuck around from his segment when we talked about some veto override day bills. Thanks again to Shona Holmes. And now, moving forward, we have our next guest, special treat. Haven't had him on in a while, Rich Gerard.
Well, thank you.
Welcome to the program, sir.
And I thought I was hardcore introducing myself as a charter member of evilconservative.com.
Yes, right. That's you. We're them. We're those right-wing guys, you know. That's us.
Well, I do have Kimberly Morin on every Monday morning.
That
I think
helps,
that makes
yes.
up for my shortcomings.
She writes for us as well, yeah. So you're running for office. Now, well, first of all, Gerard at Large, great show.
Thank you.
Wish I had more time to listen to it. I get 15-minute window on my way to work. You know, that's pretty much it. So I never call in, even if I want to, because I'm going to be getting out of the car, and it's just no point. But
the joys of being in a commuter hour.
Yes, absolutely. So you're running for office in Manchester. I know why, but let's talk about that.
Well, first off, what is the actual official title? Because we had a little bit of a tussle at the beginning of the show. I said school board. You were saying something
Board of
else.
School Committee, Manchester Board of School Committee.
Yes,
something.
well, the technical name of the Manchester School Board is the Board of School Committee. Just like the governing body in Manchester is the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and I am running for an at-large seat on the Board of School Committee, but we'll call it the school board.
At large. It
At
fits.
Yes, yes. Well, you know,
just add that to the end of your show. Gerard at Large. Never mind.
yeah. No. Well, I talk an awful lot about education and education issues and the stupid things that school boards do around our listening area on a regular basis, and I finally
Legion is the word I would use for the epic stupidity.
Good God. But you know, we've been able to bring through the radio show a lot of attention to things that are happening at various school boards and at the state. But there's only so far you can go from behind the microphone, especially if you have administrations like you have in Manchester that are intent on keeping from the public that which is theirs to know, keeping from the school board that which is its to know, and doing it with a certain irreverence for the law that we as citizens in this state have to spend the money and the time to go to court to enforce. I'd had enough, and I said, if I'm really going to start to drill down on some of those areas that need to be fixed and get some changes made, I'm going to have to go back once more unto the breach.
And since you're probably already going to the meetings, you might as well just be on the
you
board.
know, I said that to my wife. I said, I'll only go to the committee meetings that I'm assigned to, and I'll only go to the board meetings instead of every meeting that I go to now. So I might actually get more out of this time. More free time out of this.
Might be a more comfortable seat.
Well, it's a seat. I held its cousin. I was the first elected alderman at large in the city of Manchester, so I kind of know the territory and I know the terrain.
Well, you certainly bring up a really big problem that we have certainly talked about. I have seen it firsthand, both as a taxpayer and on my budget committee. Mm-hmm. We have Jorge Mesa Tejada, who comes on often.
Love Jorge.
Oh, absolutely. What a font of knowledge, and he's so free to mentor people.
Well,
but
when he was banned from the Hampstead School Board, we had some fun with him on the radio show, and, what do you expect from an operation that's run by Superintendent Earl F. Metzler II?
Earl of Metzler.
Oh, yes, the Earl of Metzler.
We love him.
But we touched upon it earlier today on the override votes that Max brought us. But it's a case where the school department and the teachers themselves believe they are an entity unto themselves, that they are far above us on the plane of living, and to put it bluntly, that their crap don't stink.
Well,
and what you described, that they feel perfectly capable and able to not tell stuff to anybody else because they own the children.
Right. Well, they certainly act as if they are entitled to conduct themselves as they see fit. And one of the big issues that I have with every school board that I cover, there are very few Donna Greens out there of the Timberlane Regionals. There are very few John Liscarses out there. Art Beaudry is decent on the Manchester School Board, but he's outmanned and outgunned. Deb Langton on the Manchester School Board. There are very few people who will look at the edubabble, or I should say, look at the people who just spewed the edubabble and talked in a language that nobody understands, and sit there and say, for those of us who don't know what you just said, let's try to bring it down to where we can understand it. And I'm firmly convinced that the bigger government gets, the more complicated it gets because of state and federal mandates and all of the stuff that we have to deal with now. The more they speak in a language that is designed to intimidate the elected officials into compliance with what they want, as opposed to making themselves look stupid by asking the questions that need to be asked to understand and discover the proof of what they're saying. And it's sometimes not even that hard. I mean, one of the biggest things I think we accomplished through the radio show was when Deb Livingston, the Manchester superintendent, came to the Curriculum and Instruction Committee meeting 2 years ago last month, and said, oh, if we don't adopt Common Core, the state says we're going to lose our state adequacy grant and federal funding. Now, okay, in Manchester, when you take federal and state funds, you're looking at over $75 million. And not one person there, not one, zero, said, what's your evidence of that? Who told you that? Where did that come from? It took me filing a right-to-know request from the radio show to say, please provide any and all communiques between you and the State Board of Education, any laws, any regs, anything that would substantiate your claim that the state will withhold not just federal funds, but state adequacy grant money. And after that all came down, they were forced to retract the statement, and Virginia Berry, who was the originator of the threat, the Commissioner of Education, had to stand down from those positions. But, I take a look at this and say it's an accountability problem, there's a transparency problem, and there's an unwillingness for people. It drives me crazy when you see school board members say, oh, yes, they're our educational leader. We should give them what they say they need to do the job. Well, if that's your position, why are you sitting on the school board?
Well, I think that goes to the point of the ordinary person, if they can get themselves elected, because let's face it, you're going to be faced with a big contingent of schoolies who are going to oppose you. Trust me, I had the same thing in my area when I said no new red shiny fire engine, and the fire engineers and firemen all rose up and joined with the schoolies because I've been hard on them and got me out of office. I haven't been able to get back in since.
Right.
They hate me.
Right.
At least I have a good reason. But anyways, there is this this awe of professionals that seems to run rife among elected officials, that if somebody that we're paying says something, we have to accept it prima facie as being truthful. And it just drives me, you're right, it drives me crazy, because I'm a simple person. Yes, my critics call me a simpleton. I'm okay with that. But if you can't answer the simple question,
right,
and then you get mad at me because I've asked the question,
right, as I've said oftentimes from my perch behind the microphone, I'm not the bad guy because I asked the question. And the people who are making me a bad guy because I asked the question are the ones who don't want to answer the question. So you have to ask yourself, why don't they want to answer the question?
Because you hate children.
I do. Especially the 5 that I have. They drive me absolutely crazy.
I was going to say, it must have been going back to school and whatever you guys are doing, everybody, the school thing, the experience.
I have a sophomore, a freshman, an 8th grader, a 4-year-old, and a 3-year-old.
Because, I have 2 in college now, and I have 1 into sophomore in high school. And even just, like we were talking a couple weeks ago, that these national groups always schedule these major events like the Jackson Hole Summit, and AFP had one. It's the week or within the 2 weeks where there's no way in hell I can leave the house because my wife's a teacher. She's going back to work.
Yeah.
Why do you do this to me? This is the worst time of the year for me. And at the end of the year, same thing. They always do that. And I'm like, don't do that. Schedule them some other time because we're busy.
Yeah. And I think Steve's got a great point, because they do a lot of this stuff knowing that people are busy. To me, government should be 4, 5, 6 levels down deep. And they use that against us.
Oh, sure.
And when stuff goes on, that they say, well, come and see us. I'm working, you nitwit.
Yeah, we'll make that behavioral survey that we're going to do our best to not tell you about, available at the guidance office during regular school hours, so that if you want to come in and see it, we won't let you take a copy. You can take a look.
Well, you have to run it on your own laptop, and by the way, we don't have no Wi-Fi or Ethernet cables to let you use it with.
Yeah.
Which brings up another thing. What is your stance about all this automated testing that you would literally have to take in the computer lab, and that never is allowable for a parent to watch and proctor?
Absolutely opposed. Absolutely opposed. Absolutely opposed. And Mayor Gatzis in Manchester has been among the leaders in the state to say we don't want to do this. And I will add my voice to that. I have been a very loud opponent of the Smarter Balanced Assessment, which is here in the state of New Hampshire. I understand state law requires a standardized test, but it doesn't have to be the Smarter Balanced test. These assessments largely are non-academic. And I really think that what we need to do is, look, this ain't rocket. By the way, let me throw something out at you. Could you please explain to me what a 21st century skill is?
That you can text while walking up the street without running into anybody, anything,
using your
or falling into a
EBT
hole.
card to buy cigarettes and alcohol and not getting caught. Sorry, I turned your mic off.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Knowing what the scientific method is. A lot of young people come out of high school not knowing what the scientific method is. They've heard of it, but they don't know how to follow
now there's
it.
a reasonable answer. Aren't you unhappy that you asked the two of us?
No, I'm perfectly happy that I asked it, because here's the thing, and it's going to get to your question on testing. We have seen a complete distortion of what education needs to be, because we're in pursuit of college and career readiness in the 21st century. We have to have 21st century skills. God rest his soul, former Manchester Superintendent Tom Brennan, who used to anchor the education segment that I do each week on the show, said, employers don't want 21st century skills. They want 17th century skills. They want 18th century skills. You know what those are? He said to me. I said, what? He
Functional.
said, they can read. They can write. They can do arithmetic. They can develop the basic skills and building blocks that will allow them to go into any work environment and learn what they need to learn so they can be productive. So now we take a look at these standardized tests, and what are they testing? In many cases, it's not the children's ability to read, to write, to do math, or any of the thing to understand, certainly not to understand history and civics, which I think ought to be added to the reading, writing, arithmetic, and that.
Sorry, it's basically a comprehension exercise in Newspeak.
Well, it's even worse than that if you take a look at some of the questions that they're being asked, because what they're really doing is they're developing psychological profiles on the kids.
All right, we're going to take a really short break. Stay tuned. We're going to come back and have some more fun. Stay tuned.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
GrokTALK comes to you live almost every Saturday morning from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time on New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. You can also listen live at Spreaker.com. If you missed a live show, catch up with the podcast at GraniteGrok.com, Spreaker.com, on Stitcher Radio, at iTunes, TuneIn, or iHeartRadio, and now on The Rock, New Hampshire's Christian radio station, TheRockNHCR.com. GrokTALK is a mobile-ready broadcast, so you can listen anywhere, anytime on your PC, laptop, tablet, or smartphone.
GrokTALK.
Welcome back to GrokTALK. We are talking to Gerard at Large's humble host, Rich Gerard, who's joined us today.
With the never humble opinion.
With a never humble opinion, because you can't have one if you want anybody to listen to you. You know, I was thinking, you started to get to the civics part, and I was thinking, the one standardized assessment they should be forced to take, and it should affect whether or not students are allowed to pass, is the citizenship test.
Yep.
They should all have to take that. And I don't care if you're talking 3rd grade, 5th grade, 7th grade. I mean, we make fun of this because it's funny how bad things are, but in the 50s, everybody knew who was on the cabinet. They knew stuff that you ask a college graduate and they're like, Walking Dead. Yeah. It's embarrassing.
I post those kinds of videos all the time. I got another one queued up, ready to post up. We don't know our history. We don't know our Constitution. And then we wonder why this country's going to hell in a handbasket.
But that's intentional that we don't know these things.
And I've been saying that for years. That is absolutely intentional.
Of course it is.
That if you don't know your history, then anything sounds good.
Right.
And
including Bernie Sanders.
Well, yeah. I mean, we are teaching our kids to feel, not to think. If all of the teachers, as I told during Max's segment,
Syndrome.
Listen to this.
Good movie.
I have a close family friend who is going to get her special ed degree.
Mm-hmm.
She is being taught, don't trust the parents.
Of course not. We're too stupid to understand our own children and their needs.
Well, not only that, but then you look at some of this stuff of, our founders were nothing but slave owners. We're seeing the result of that in our school systems. Mm-hmm. And just because today's hypocrisy of our social justice warriors from the leftist socialists are basically trying to wipe that out, and then we wonder why we can't get anything done.
All you need to do is read one book about that, and it's, is it David Barton, The Jefferson Lies?
Yes.
The book is The Jefferson Lies. I believe it's by David Barton. Fantastic book, which will dispel the idea that Jefferson or any of them were evil slave owners, among other things. I mean, yes, some of them owned slaves, but it's not like... Well, in the book, Barton basically says Jefferson couldn't free his slaves. It was against Virginia law.
Yeah. I mean, they talk about Republicans and Jim Crow. Mm-hmm. Most of those were still down in the South by Democrat lawmakers.
Of course.
But again, that's the kind of history.
Well,
I mean, if they talk about the bad things here, you got to talk about the bad things over here as well. And they won't do it. It is all, like you said, can they add?
Well, I'm going to pick up on something that you said, Skip, and take it a step further. They're not being taught to feel. We all have feelings. I mean, we all feel things. What they're doing is they're doing two things. They're not teaching kids to develop their ability to reason and be intellectual, so their ability to reason and use their intellect to override their feelings when necessary and appropriate can be done. So they're disabling the intellectual ability that we as human beings need to develop if we are to govern our passions and feelings rather than be governed by them. They are basically boiling us down to our animal instinct, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
And I see that as problematic.
I was doing a little bit of history research. The Democrats to this day continue saying, well, those Southern conservative Democrats moved over to the Republican Party in the 60s and 70s and so forth. And that isn't true. When you actually go through the list of these really prominent white supremacists and KKK members and Robert Byrd, Democratic senator from West Virginia, if you look at them, they stay in the Democratic Party. When the Republicans campaigned down south and out west and some of the areas, the little hotbeds of discrimination, they were very careful to only bring over basically real conservatives, people who were not racist at all. The problems came up when they brought up affirmative action. During the affirmative action era, Democrats were really heavy on giving special preferences to disadvantaged minorities. They kept extending it to gays and lesbians, and then they extended it to women, and so on and so forth, so that eventually, under the affirmative action era, everyone who was in a victim class, which could be just about anyone, 90% of the population, call themselves...
Except me.
Right, you're totally not the right guy.
You're an old white Irishman. You have no chance.
Swedish, thank you.
Swedish, sorry.
Let me build upon that and what you just said, because we've got this social justice warrior mentality that has now floated into the schools. But you brought up an important point, the fundamental building blocks. For instance, I help people with software. And when things go bump in the night or worse, bump in the day when the president comes into your office and says, why isn't this working? And to be able to do that kind of stuff, you need those little fundamental blocks, and you have to build on them, sometimes for years, to get to the point where somebody says, well, this is what's gone wrong, and you go,
Of course.
mentally, I string 10, 15 blocks together and go, I know exactly what the problem is. Go check that.
Right.
What you're saying is that we have to be doing the same thing in school at a more basic level, but creating those little fundamental blocks.
Well, of
How
course.
are you, when you go on the board of school members or whatever the heck the name is,
School board.
We'll just call it the school board.
what is it that you would bring to the table that the current folks can't to get that to happen?
Let me give you an example. I was sent a clip of a community television show in Manchester that is hosted by a school board member, and that the superintendent and the assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction appeared on. During that, in that clip, it was the assistant superintendent announcing that the City of Manchester schools were going to have new elementary math curriculum.
Again?
Something called Envision and something called My Math, if I remember correctly. And now I watched the school board pretty closely. And I'm not saying, I'm a pretty good goalie, but even the best goalie is going to let, a puck get by. So maybe I missed this. But I don't recall a meeting of the Curriculum and Instruction Committee, and I don't recall a meeting of the school board where there was any kind of discussion about the new math curriculum and the merits of the new math curriculum versus the old one. And here are the working committees that did their evaluations. Here's where the parents were involved or included. And here's why we're recommending this committee and the school board adopt this new curriculum so that we can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and, once again, go out and buy a bunch of new books. So to answer your question, I think what we need to do, and it feeds into my overall mission in running, is involve the public and involve the board in decisions that it should be making before these things are done. So how will I do that? I think I'll do that by asking what we're using, how did it get there, what process did it go through, and like I did on the radio show. You know why Manchester took up any discussion at all about Common Core, which ultimately led to the Manchester Academic Standards, which is a story all unto itself because it turned out to be Manchester's rewrite of Common Core, was because I grabbed people like the mayor and the chairman of the Curriculum and Instruction Committee and others, and I said, well, we keep hearing that these are voluntary standards and that they're not mandates. When has the Board of School Committee ever had a discussion about whether or not these standards should be adopted, and why are we letting the administration go forward with implementing something you guys have never discussed? So I think you have to force the conversations, Skip, and be able to bring the attention that comes with slowing down the process. You have to understand something about government, especially schools. Okay? I want to make this. I think this is a fundamental point, because I used to be one of those guys who was angry at the slow pace of government. Why can't government work more like a business? Blah, blah, blah. Well, there are certain aspects of government that should be more like a business. The efficient operation of your highway department should be along business principles. Okay? But gee, if you're a community and you're going to contemplate whether or not you want to adopt the complete streets program or the sustainable development model of this, that, or the other thing, that is not something that should be rammed through a governing body because businesses like to do things quickly and a business wouldn't linger on all this stuff. No. There's a process that needs to be gone through. There's a public that needs to buy in. There's a public that's going to pay the bill, and there's a public that's going to, suffer the benefits or the consequences of the decision of the governing body. And I think whenever you open up the process, and it's a proper process, and people aren't simply limited to the 2 or 3 minutes they're given before their governing body, where you'll have committees that will hold hearings and take the expert testimony and actually listen to the public, even if they just happen to be dopey housewives or concerned husbands or fathers. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of the shortcomings of what is being done or what could be done, and a lot of opportunities that otherwise would be unknown, will come forward. And the public process is one where the public input needs to be given a fair opportunity to be heard and an honest consideration.
You're absolutely right on that. The due process. Government, to be open and transparent, has to have a process that's open
that everybody can follow.
Correct.
It's got to be you've got to be able to follow it from A to B.
Yeah. Here, I'm going to go you one further though. We see this wholesale take out and plug back in of something totally different, and like you said, nobody can tell you does it work or not.
Right.
And I just don't understand why more school boards just don't say, well, we don't have to change for the sake of change because you tell us to change.
Right.
How about you do a couple of tests? We have our our baseline folks. We're going to take a couple of the classrooms. They're going to stay that way. Then if you want, bring in another classroom and try this thing. Right. Let's try it for 2, 3, 4 years and then assess which way is better. Yes, some people may not, if this is better, they get left behind a little bit. But if this is a disaster, then you lessen the harm to the whole. But at least then you can objectively. I come from a manufacturing background. This is what you do. You just don't switch. You take a baseline, you get your measurements, your metrics, and you say, this is what we're going to test for. Now we do a small-scale experiment. Is this more value add? And I don't see anything like that happening in education. It's all, I got this new theory. Let's put it nationwide.
Well, a lot of this, though, you have to understand, and this is a local control issue. A lot of this happens because the federal government comes up with something like Race to the Top, or No Child Left Behind, or America 2000, or Goals 2000. I mean, there's been any number of federal initiatives, and what
performance-based education, outcome-based education.
Outcome-based, yeah.
Well, the outcome-based education.
Refuse the money.
Well. And the only time that's ever been done was Ovid LaMontagne when he was chairman of the State Board of Education. But here's the thing. The mindset is, and we're going through this fight in Manchester, and I've got a big bullseye painted on my back because I'll stand up and I'll say, well, wait a minute, what's your evidence that more money will fix the problem? Where's your evidence of when the schools have been more funded in a manner that you like, that there was proof of what you say was going to happen? So I don't concede the premise.
We got about a minute.
Okay, I don't concede the premise that the only difference between where we are now and superior schools is spending more money. I think we need to take a good, hardcore look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, and come up with ways that we believe it would best be done before we enter into the discussion of whether or not we're quote-unquote under-resourced. And that's going to take time. And what people need to understand is if you change the way you do something in education, it's not, we're going to try it for a year or two. You have to be committed to it for a 6, 8, 12-year period of time. Because that's the way it works.
We're out of time. How do people reach you?
They reach me at gerardatlarge.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming down and talking to us.
Gentlemen, appreciate the opportunity.
All right. This is GrokTALK, and I can turn that back on for a minute so you can say goodbye to our lovely listeners. We'll be back next week, and I don't know who our guests are yet. I never really know. I kind of do this on Friday sometimes. That's just the way it works. But thanks again to everybody who came in today. Max, of course, Shona Holmes, and Rich Gerard, and we will be back next week with somebody. But in October, we're on remotes, so don't forget, we're going to be on the road at a bunch of events for Groktober, and we'll get back to that later. We'll post it up online, and that's the end of this. We're going. Goodbye. See ya. Have a nice day. What are you looking at me like that for?
Gremlins on the roof.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Grok TV.